Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Stars with us. Yesterday, Dustin, Indiana won their third consecutive Big Ten game after losing 3 consecutive Big Ten games. And they lost to Iowa after giving up a 21-point lead, but that was the game they lost Race Thompson. And Mike had talked about having lost those 2 starters before and how it's affected them. And granted, there was no doubt that you knew that, of course, it affects your team. I got your starters for a reason. But it was the words when they lost Race Thompson, he talked about the team was shell-shocked. Mm-hmm. And nothing has made more sense now looking back at that because they had a 21-point lead.
Yeah.
And they just froze. They were shell-shocked and lost that game. And that will come back to hurt them, I think, still, no matter how good the rest of their season goes, because that's a loss. And this conference is, when you look at Purdue, it only has 1 loss right now, and you've got 4. You got a lot of catching up to do, and that's a big difference. But it was just how they were losing, and it's like they were sleepwalking through games. And then we talked about the unbelievable change and turnaround. And Don Fisher was on with us earlier, and I asked this question to Trey Galloway yesterday, and actually we'll hear from him. And I asked Mike Woodson, and I brought it up to Don. But what the thing I saw yesterday, even not in these other 2 games, but it was emotion. They were actually playing with emotion. Right. And I think it was led by Trey Galloway, but Miller Kopp, I got to give him credit for that. He doesn't do a lot else. I don't think he can do a lot else. So he's going to bring some moxie now, which is fine if that works. If that's part of the winning success for that team,
sure.
Hey, whatever works for him, because you look at if you look at the stat sheet, of course. While Jalen Hood-Schifino didn't have a great day, 2 points, he took 6 shots. He just didn't hit his shots. Miller Kopp, though, on the other hand, 1 of 3, and I'm pretty sure all 3 of those shots came in the second half, and one that he made was a dunk, of all things, a baseline dunk, which I was like, who was that? When I saw it, I'm like, who was that?
Every once in a while, he surprises you taking the ball.
Well, the having to play with, he's being forced right now to play tough. He wasn't, none of them were, but right now he's being forced, and that's one of the things that he can do. I guess is like, hey, all right, I can be a tough guy if they need that. But I think that in itself will help him become more offensively minded,
right?
Because it just drives you. He's just not. He doesn't seem to be driven to score in any way, because you look at other guys that come off the bench that get off. Tamar Bates, for one. I mean, my God,
Tamar's looking for
17 points off the Bates.
I mean, and a big part of it is just being able to create your own. I mean, like, Miller can do some things off the balance, but if he's going to drive in a straight line. I mean, there is some wiggle to Tamar Bates' game. He's capable of crossing you up and of jab stepping and of doing something that, if he has a defender on him, can get enough space to get a shot off, where Miller Kopp is not quite as good at that piece. Bates is better at that. And Bates is just more wired to look for those opportunities. If you just cross somebody up and do a fade or a pull up or whatever it's going to be, Miller Kopp's less interested in that. And they have not done a good job, I don't think, of just drawing something up and saying, like, we're going to run Miller off of 2 screens, and he's going to run baseline and he's going to come around and someone's going to find him. But another piece to it, obviously, is a lot of times that he has gotten shots, it's gotten out of just doubles from Trace, and I guess no one's going to double team Trace Jackson Davis anymore. They're just going to let him score 30 points every night.
Well,
is that the decision that the Big Ten has made?
Yesterday, I was watching the game. Michigan State started out double teaming Trace, but then they went away from that. But when you've got 2 guys that are scoring 17 points, that are knocking down what were they from 3 combined? 5 of 6 for Tamar, and I don't think
they were 8 of 9.
He's gonna say, he didn't miss a shot. Yeah, he didn't miss a shot. Yeah. So when you get 2 guys that are shooting 90% from 3-point line and they're just putting up that many shots, you can't double team him. And that's the thing that Indiana has not had. They have not had an offense that forces teams to do what Indiana wants them to do.
That's true. Yeah.
And by hitting these shots, they are. And that's why I say that every game, either Trey Galloway, Tamar Bates, or Jordan Geronimo, they have to have a good game. Somebody has to draw some attention away from Trace Jackson Davis. Jalen Hood-Schifino, you hope he has a good game, but regardless, he's going to be on the ball. He's going to be running things. So, you're going to have to. That's why Miller Kopp having some offensive output would be nice, because it takes a little pressure off of Jalen Hood-Schifino right now without having of having to score, having to run the offense, having to do all those things. That's why Miller Kopp. That's why
this man frustrates you. I can tell. He personally, his lack of shots bothers you personally.
It does, because you look at Jordan Geronimo. He got off 5 shots.
In
Trey
13
Galloway,
minutes.
In much less time, he only played 13 minutes. He gets
and got 5 fouls in a tech. What was that all about? I was flying for most of this. I didn't see this. What? I mean,
that's a second technical for Jordan Geronimo in a matter of weeks, too. By the way, he got the
what is going on? That was
pass to the referee.
That was one thing that really stood up me on the stat sheet when I looked at it after, because I haven't really had a chance to rewatch it because on the plane most of the time.
Oh, they just chippy instead of just separating stuff. Officials
I get it. It happens.
Like to do.
I mean, it's. I mean, obviously, it's clear that someone else. You can't live on Trace alone. I mean, you like even when he's got 30. I mean, 30's. Here, why am I off? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I got kicked off for a second there. But no, I think it is obviously critical that it's somebody else. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same person every night. Preferably, it's not the same person every night. But you need at least 2 other guys to score the basketball. And obviously on Sunday it was Bates and Galloway. It's not always going to be Bates and Galloway. I think in the previous game it was Geronimo and Hood-Schifino. So you obviously need somebody to take some level of attention off. Now, I mean, if I was a Big Ten opponent, I would still dare someone else to beat me. I would still throw 2 bodies at Trace Jackson Davis as much as possible and say, you're not getting 30 off me. I don't care. I'm going to presume that, like however good Bates and Galloway or Kopp or whoever might be shooting that night is that day, that he's not going to kill me all day, or I'm going to find a way to double off of Geronimo or Thompson or whoever it is at the 4 and scramble and whatever and live with whatever they get. I mean, like, again, when Trace is that good, I mean, they should be a tough cover. Like Indiana has enough talent that it should be a tough cover. But if I'm an opponent, I'm still thinking, okay, like I'm not letting Trace get 30. Like I'm just not. I'm presuming that's my worst possibility. And I'm going to, if Bates and Galloway beat me because they knock down 8 threes, I'll live with that, because that's not what the scouting report says is going to happen. And I'm going to trust that at some point they're going to miss those shots. Like that. Like I can those wide open and I'll be fine. But yeah, it is a much better deal when they are getting those kinds of contributions. And I still think Bates has a chance to be really, really good. And so it's cool to see those flashes when he's going. I mean, I think like I understand the shell shock piece to it, but like there was still way too much talent on that team to get beat the way they did initially after the injuries. I mean, like they weren't playing defensively as hard as they should be. There's enough defensive talent even without Thompson and Johnson to be okay. There's definitely enough offensive talent. I mean, again, if you would have told me, I like, as much as Race is heart and soul, from a pure talent perspective, he was in a way the most the guy that you could lose, because you had Geronimo and Renew behind them, and I was thinking those guys were going to be fine, and they weren't. They didn't get nearly as much production from those guys as I expected, and so it's obviously big for them that you're seeing those guys finally step up. Geronimo in particular, Geronimo stepping up and being the guy that we know he could be, that we've already seen. like we talked a lot about this summer about whether or not he was going to be a 3 and make that leap to being a guy that you can put on the floor with Thompson at the same time. And he hasn't become that guy, but at least he should be a guy that there's not drop off when Thompson steps off the floor. And you're finally seeing that again, and that's a big deal. But there definitely is. They are more emotional. Woodson's apparently, based on what I've seen from you guys, Woodson has apparently really got after this team, and he needed to. That strikes me as clear that Slynn needed to step up in that regard, and Mike Woodson did. So I think the complaints that he wasn't getting enough out of them were fair. And I think you got to give the go on the other scale of that and say like that since then he obviously clearly saw a problem and worked on it and made sure that this team is coming with more fire than it did in those previous losses.
Yeah, and now they even though Purdue has gotten out to such a jump on winning the league, I lost my
everybody else. It's a crapshoot for second place in the Big Ten. It could be anybody.
Oh my! There are how many teams that are at 4-4 right now, which is what Indiana is. There's like 4 teams, I think, and Indiana's tied for 4th or 5th right now, I think. 2 weeks after being tied for last.
Yeah. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams between 3 and 5 losses. Like 11. That's incredible. That's absolutely nuts. So there are 2 games separating 2nd and 12th in the Big Ten right now. And Ohio State's 3 and 5, and they're in 12th. And there's a lot of talent on that team. They're
Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State is my Mendoza team on the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I know they're good enough to be an NCAA tournament team, but they've that's an ugly loss to Minnesota at home.
Yeah, yes it is.
And they're 11-8 already. It's like with a lot of Big Ten games to play left. So I think that Minnesota loss may end up screwing them. Of course, you take Nebraska out, Minnesota out. Maryland is the other team, but they're 12-7. They're 9-1 at home, but they're 1-5 on the road.
It's possible. Like you look at it right now, and like you can, like you're looking at a lot of
10, baby.
What's up?
I think 10 Big Ten teams right now are looking at the tournament.
I mean, they could be. I mean, now obviously a bunch of them can fade and they're going to play each other, so they're probably going to knock. Some are going to knock each other out of it. But I mean, the thing about it is that Purdue's the only one that you'd put on a top 3 line right now. Like maybe top 4. Like you might not get.
That has changed, and that has changed in the 2-week period. I mean, Rutgers was looking really good. They were on the rise, and then of course they lose, which
they lost a couple.
It's expected to be, what's going to happen in this league.
I mean, Rutgers is going to get in just on grinding the daylights out of people and making basketball feel like an absolutely miserable pursuit. And they'll get in that way because they'll win enough games playing that way.
This league is 2 shots away from being the most convoluted league you've ever seen in your life, because Purdue, they won at Ohio State barely. And they barely beat Nebraska, didn't they?
I think so. They barely beat they barely beat Michigan State,
But they've got the wins instead of not having. Yeah. But just think if 2 of those don't go their way, then they're 5-3. Then now we're looking at 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, 4-3, 5-4, 4-4, 4-4, 4-4, 4-4, 3-3. I mean, this league it is balanced beyond any year I can recall, and it's going to be strong. They're going to be, I think, 10 teams will make it into the tournament.
It's possible. I mean, it's tight. It's going to be one of those that, again, like they're going to beat each other up, and then so you're going to look at that at the end and say, okay, well, how good are they? You're definitely going to look and say, well, this is a better league than I thought it was.
It probably gets to 9.
Everybody's going to be right around the same, and it all depends on how that's going to look. I mean, You know, you're going to be looking at net rankings, and I haven't looked at those, but that's really going to tell a lot of the tale as to what ends up that way. You know, I don't know that there's another super conference in there that you're looking at and saying, okay, well, you got to get in as many teams from that league because they're clearly overperforming. You know, like you don't like the ACC is not particularly strong by its standards. It's probably going to get 4 or 5, but not some crazy number like you've seen some years in the past. You know, I think the Big 12 is going to get a bunch in, but there's only so many teams in the Big 12. You know, you're probably looking at, you know, you're definitely looking at K-State, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas, TCU, and Baylor as sure things. After that, they're kind of up in the air as whether Oklahoma State or Oklahoma get in, or West Virginia has a chance, but West Virginia's 1-6 in the league, so they're probably not. You know, Big East will probably get several here. You know, just trying to look through these, but there's going to be opportunity for the Big Ten. It's just not going to be a very, you know, someone's got to make a move if they're going to get on a high line, and Indiana's in a position to do that. You know, I think Indiana is in a position. You know, they have that win over Xavier that looks really good. That the win over North Carolina doesn't look as good as you would hope, but it's still a win over North Carolina. You know, it's still going to be something. And so it's like you just got to pile up as many wins as they can, and they can end up being the second highest seeded team coming out of the Big Ten.